Lena Hart ducked behind a marble column just as a security guard turned his head, her heart hammering so loudly she swore someone could hear it over the rooftop DJ's pulsing bass. This was crazy, beyond crazy. But she was already here, and turning back now after scaling the fire escape in 5-inch heels and squeezing through a half-open window wasn't an option. It wasn't about getting in. It was about what this night meant. For Lena, it was a dare. A breath of rebellion after 3 years of scraping by, juggling 2 jobs, and trying to keep her late mother's apartment from being swallowed by back rent. It was her best friend's voice echoing in her head. Just once do something reckless, something wild, something not so responsible. So here she was, standing at the edge of New York's most exclusive rooftop gala, wearing a borrowed black satin dress and a $20 clutch stuffed with nerves. The rooftop was ridiculous in the best way. Fairy lights twinkled above, casting a golden glow over crystal tables and white rose centerpieces. Waiters in white jackets carried trays of champagne, and a jazz quartet played on a floating glass stage above the infinity pool. And the view skyline glittering, the Empire State Building just close enough to touch made Lena's breath catch. She didn't belong here. That much was obvious the second she stepped onto the terrace. Everyone was polished perfect. Whispering names she didn't know, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world, but she held her chin high and walked like she had every right to be there. "Champagne?" a waiter asked. She nodded, took the glass with a thank you, and tried not to gulp it. Lost. The voice was deep. Confident? Right behind her. Lena turned slowly, praying it wasn't security. It wasn't. The man was tall, maybe early 30s, with dark hair tousled just enough to look expensive, sharp cheekbones, and eyes so intense they felt like a spotlight. She swallowed. No, just admiring the skyline. He studied her. "You don't look like you belong here." Lena's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression calm. "That's a bold thing to say to a stranger." He tilted his head. It wasn't an insult, it was a compliment. That surprised a laugh out of her. "You think I'm a compliment to this rooftop?" "No." He stepped closer. "I think this rooftop's lucky to have you." There was something about the way he said it, like it wasn't a line, like he actually meant it. Her heart tripped. "I'm Nolan Beck," he said, offering his hand. Lena hesitated, then shook it. "Lena Hart." His grip was warm, firm. "So, Lena Hart, what brings you to my party?" Her lungs froze. "Your party," he nodded toward the glass elevator. "I own the building and the one next to it." Of course he did. And of course she'd crashed a Billionaire's rooftop gala. She should have panicked, should have run. But he was still holding her hand, and something in his eyes, curious, a little amused, not angry, made her stay. "I wasn't exactly invited," she said carefully. His lips twitched. "You don't say. Are you going to have me thrown out?" "I haven't decided yet." "Oh, well, in that case, I'll just go get a second drink while you think it over." To her surprise, he laughed, a real one. "You're not like anyone at this party." She glanced around. "Because I'm not dripping in diamonds. Because you look like you're trying to breathe. Everyone else is trying to impress." "I don't have much to impress anyone with," she said before she could stop herself. He raised a brow. "You're wrong." Lena didn't know what to say to that. Nolan leaned in a little. "Come with me." "Where?" "Somewhere quieter." Her brain screamed no, but her feet followed him into a private section of the rooftop, separated by sheer white curtains and guarded by a silent man in black. Inside was a lounge area with plush couches, a bar, and a view that made her feel like she was floating above the city. He poured them each a drink from a crystal decanter. "I have to ask," he said, handing her a glass. "How did you get in?" She took a sip. "Fire escape, West Side." He blinked. Then laughed again. "You're insane, maybe, and brave, or stupid. I like brave better." She sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. "Why are you being nice to me?" "Because you're the most interesting person here." She looked at him. "You don't even know me." "I want to." Her heart did a weird flip. Nolan sat beside her. Not too close, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, clean, expensive, addictive. "You know," he said, "I've thrown dozens of parties like this." But I've never found someone like you climbing in through a window. Maybe you're not looking in the right places. I think I just did, she stared at him. You're serious? Yes, Nolan, this is crazy. You're you, she laughed, a little breathless. You don't even know that I'm not some gold digger. You didn't even know who I was, still. He leaned in, speaking softly. You didn't come here for money or status, you came here for life, and that's the most honest thing I've seen in a long time. She didn't know what to say. So she didn't say anything. They sat in silence, sipping their drinks, the city stretching endlessly around them. Then he asked, What do you do, waitress? Dog walker. Sometimes I do copywriting freelance when I can get the gigs. He nodded like that made perfect sense. You live around here, Brooklyn, rent-controlled. Barely. Parents? My mom passed away 3 years ago. It's just me now. I'm sorry, she shrugged. She left me the apartment. I'm just trying to hold on to it. He looked at her for a long moment. You're stronger than you know. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until he said it. Nolan stood and offered her his hand again. Dance with me. There's no music. There doesn't have to be. She hesitated only a second before sliding her hand into his. He pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other cradling her palm, and began to sway with her under the stars. Her heart thudded against his chest. Nolan, she whispered, what are we doing? I'm not sure, but I don't want to stop. She looked up at him. You barely know me. I know I can't stop looking at you. And then, slowly, as if the city itself held its breath, he kissed her. It was soft, careful, but it lit something inside her that hadn't burned in years. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide. I don't do this, she said. Neither do I. And somehow that made it real. She was falling. Fast. And something told her he was too. By the time Lena stepped outside the building just before dawn, the city had softened into a watercolor of pale gold and muted blue. Her heels dangled from her hand, her cheeks flushed with something far more dangerous than champagne. She hadn't meant to stay that long, hadn't meant to let herself get pulled deeper into Nolan's orbit. But he'd walked her to the elevator himself, trailing his fingers lightly down her arm as they said goodbye, and the look in his eyes when the doors closed had made her knees buckle. Lena didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second, every word. Every flicker of emotion on his face. It wasn't just attraction. It was something electric and terrifying and impossible. 3 days passed. No call, no message. Not that she should have expected one. She hadn't given him a number, and it wasn't like he'd asked. Maybe it had been a moment. One of those strange, beautiful things that happens just once and then vanishes. She was wiping down a cafe table when a tall man in a black suit stepped through the front door. He scanned the room, then walked straight to her. Miss Lena Hart, she froze. Yes, he handed her a thick envelope. From Mr. Beck. Before she could say anything, he turned and left. Inside was a single card, heavy stock, embossed with gold. Dinner. Saturday. 7 o'clock. The driver will wait. NB, she stared at it, heart thudding harder than it had that night on the rooftop. Saturday came faster than she expected. The car that pulled up outside her apartment wasn't just sleek, it was silent, black, and long enough to carry a small orchestra. The driver stepped out and opened the door without a word. Inside, the seats were buttery leather, and a single white orchid rested on the seat beside her. When they pulled up to the building, this time through the front entrance, she was ushered through a private elevator. At the top floor, a butler opened the door into an apartment so large she couldn't see where it ended. The space was warm. Not cold or sterile like she'd imagined billionaire homes would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire penthouse, and the skyline flickered like stars trying to outshine each other. Nolan stood near the bar in a navy suit that looked like it had been stitched to his frame. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked up as she entered, and something behind his eyes eased. You came. You made it difficult to say no. He walked to her slowly, not like a man in a rush, but like he didn't want to miss a single second of watching her. I didn't want to wait until another party to see you again. You could have asked for my number. I didn't want a text, I wanted this. She folded her arms. This being, He gestured to the dining room. The table was set for two, candles, silverware that gleamed. Crystal glasses already half full. A date, a real one. Her stomach fluttered, but she kept her voice even. We barely know each other, which is why I'm fixing that. Over dinner lobster tail with saffron risotto, he asked about her childhood, her favorite books, the worst job she'd ever had. He didn't interrupt, didn't glance at his phone. He listened like the world had gone quiet except for her voice, and when she asked about his life, he hesitated, just for a moment. My father built the first company, I expanded it. Real estate, luxury developments, hotels, private residences. That kind of thing, you sound like a corporation, he laughed. Sometimes I feel like one. Do you like it? He looked at her then, eyes unreadable. I like this. She set her fork down. That's not an answer. No, it's not. He leaned back. But it's the truth. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was charged. She stood and walked to the window, staring out at the glittering sprawl of Manhattan. He joined her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I don't know what this is, she said quietly. But it doesn't feel like something I can ignore. Don't. His voice was low. I can't either. She turned to face him. What do you want from me, Nolan? Everything I'm not supposed to. The air shifted. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. I don't usually do this, he said. And I don't mean that in a cliché way, I mean it in the sense that I don't let people in. Not really. I'm not asking for anything, she whispered. I know, that's the problem. He kissed her again, but this time it wasn't careful, it was hungry, desperate. Like he'd been holding something back and suddenly couldn't anymore. She gasped against his mouth, but didn't pull away. Her fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring herself to something solid as the world tilted. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay, she shook her head. I can't, why not? Because I don't know what happens if I do. He stepped back, breathing hard. Then let me show you. She left anyway, not because she didn't want to stay, but because she wanted it too much. Back home, she sat on the edge of her bed, shoes still on, and stared at the card he'd given her. The back had another line she hadn't noticed before. Let me try. Just once. The next morning, he was waiting when she stepped out of her building, not in a car, not in a suit. In jeans, a sweatshirt, and a coffee in each hand. Let's change the rules, he said, holding one out to her. No rooftop, no penthouse, just you and me. She took the cup. Where are we going? Anywhere you want. She stared at him, trying to reconcile this man, the billionaire who owned towers, with the one standing in front of her now, hair tousled by the wind, eyes determined. You're serious, he nodded. You said you didn't know what happens if you stay. Let's find out together. She hesitated, then stepped forward. Okay, let's go. The wind tangled through Lena's hair as she stood barefoot on the edge of a makeshift dock, staring out at the lake, the hem of her jeans damp from where she'd stepped into the shallows. Nolan stood behind her, rolling up the sleeves of a pale linen shirt, watching her with a slight tilt of his head. You didn't strike me as someone who'd suggest a lake in the middle of nowhere, she said without turning. You didn't strike me as someone who'd say yes. She glanced back at him. You didn't wait for me to. You'd have said yes eventually. And you're sure of that? I am. They had driven for hours out of the city through winding roads and thick trees until the skyline disappeared entirely. He hadn't told her where they were going, only that she'd need something warm and not to plan anything else that day. What she didn't expect was a private retreat carved into the forest, with a lake so still it reflected the sky like glass, and a cabin that looked like it had been pulled from a luxury travel magazine. Lena stepped off the dock and onto the weathered path leading back to the cabin. So, is this another one of your buildings? No, this one's just mine, no investors, no names on the paperwork except mine. She looked at him, curious. Why? Because some places aren't meant to be bought and sold, they're meant to be kept. Seems lonely. It was. Until now. A quiet settled between them, the kind that didn't feel awkward but left space for something heavier to rise. Inside, the cabin was warm with rich wood floors and tall windows that let the light pour in. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, even though it wasn't cold. Nolan moved with ease, setting mugs on the counter and opening a cupboard until he found a small tin. "Chamomile or Earl Grey?" he asked. "Chamomile." He poured the water, his movements precise. "You ever think about leaving the city?" She laughed softly. "I barely afford staying." "Leaving takes money and options. If you had both, I'd still stay. It's home, even when it's loud and unforgiving." He handed her the mug. "You like difficult things. They make the best stories." He didn't respond right away. "Then, what if the story doesn't end how you want it to? Then I rewrite the ending." They sat near the fire, the mug warming her palms. She noticed Nolan's eyes flicker to her hands before he looked back into the flames. "I used to come here when I couldn't breathe in the city," he said. "Before the meetings, before I had to be the man they expected. And now, I haven't been here in over 2 years. You brought me. I don't bring anyone." She turned toward him. "Why me?" He didn't look at her. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like someone I invented. I feel like someone real." The words settled into her chest, heavy and warm. "And what happens when you have to go back to being him? I don't know, but I want to find out who I am when I'm not." Lena leaned her head back against the couch. "You're not what I thought. I hope not. I thought you'd be calculated, cold, someone who builds empires with no time for people who struggle to afford bagels. I am all those things. I've just never had anyone look at me like I wasn't." She met his gaze. "You don't scare me, Nolan. You should. I've seen scarier. I've lived scarier." He reached for her hand then, slowly, as if asking permission. She let him. "I keep thinking this started with a lie," she said. "Me sneaking into your party. No. It started with you being brave enough to go somewhere you weren't supposed to be." She shook her head. "You saw someone who didn't belong. I saw someone who reminded me what it felt like to want something real." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it buzzed with electricity. "I'm not someone you can just keep in a penthouse," she said. "I don't want to keep you anywhere. I just want to be where you are." She stood abruptly, setting her mug down. "This scares me." "Good, it scares me too." "I don't have your world, Nolan. I don't have assistants or drivers or art hanging on my walls. I have bills I juggle and an apartment with a leak that's been dripping since January." He stood to, but didn't reach for her. "You think I care? I think eventually you will. I think I already do. And it hasn't changed how I feel. You don't know me. I know you didn't use me, that you didn't care about my name or my money. I know you're brave and raw and you'd rather speak truth than flattery. And I know that when you're in the room, I can't think about anyone else." She turned away, staring out the window at the still lake. "Let me try," he said again. "No promises, no pretending this is easy, but let's not walk away because it's terrifying." She looked at him over her shoulder. "And if I fall too fast, then I'll catch you." Her eyes filled before she could stop them, and she pressed her lips together. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." "I do." He crossed the room slowly and cupped her face in his hands. "I've built towers, Lena. I've filled them with glass and gold, and everything they said would make me happy. But you walked into my life barefoot, soaking wet, and I've never wanted anything more." She stared at him. "You're not supposed to say things like that. I've never been good at doing what I'm supposed to." And then he kissed her again, but it wasn't about hunger this time. It was about surrender, about something breaking open inside them both. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "If this goes wrong, then we go down swinging." She let out a soft laugh. "You're insane. Only about you." Outside, the wind stirred the water, scattering the reflection of the sky. Inside, they stood wrapped in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because for the first time nothing needed to be said at all. The elevator doors opened onto polished marble and sunlight so bright it pooled across the penthouse floor like a spotlight. Lena stepped out cautiously, her heels tapping softly as she walked inside. Nolan was by the window, his back to her, sleeves rolled to his elbows, one hand in his pocket as he looked out over the skyline. She hadn't seen him in 3 days, not since they returned from the lake, and her chest tightened at the sight of him. He didn't turn when she entered, That wasn't like him. Something was wrong. You disappeared, she said quietly. I needed to think. Lena took a breath. And he turned, slow and deliberate, eyes unreadable. My board found out about you. Her stomach dropped. What does that mean? They're panicked. They think you're a distraction, that I've lost focus. You're not denying it. I'm not, he said. Because I have. Lena crossed her arms, grounding herself. So what now? You cut me off to protect your empire. He walked toward her but stopped short. They want me to step down, she blinked. What? They think I've gone soft. That I'm making decisions with my heart instead of my head. And are you? He hesitated. Yes, I am. Lena's voice hardened. So this was a mistake. No. His tone sharpened. But I let you walk into a fire I should have seen coming. You're not listening to me, Nolan. I can handle fire. I've lived in it. What I can't handle is being hidden while you try to decide if I'm worth the fallout. He stepped forward. I've made my decision. Then why do you look like you're about to lose everything? Because I am. Lena's jaw tensed. You think I care about your title? I think I care too much about what it means to lose it. There was silence between them, thick, real. She dropped her arms. So you're asking me to walk away before it gets worse, he shook his head. I'm asking you to walk into this with me, all the way. No hiding, no silence, but if we do this, it's going to get loud. Lena closed her eyes for a beat, then opened them. Then let's be loud. Nolan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. There's a gala tomorrow night, press, executives. Everyone who thinks they still control me. And you're bringing me. I want them to see who I'm choosing. Lena stared at him. You're sure? He didn't blink. I've never been more. The next evening, she stood at the base of a grand staircase that looked like it had been carved from moonlight. Nolan waited at the top, already dressed in a crisp black tuxedo. The ballroom below was a symphony of crystal chandeliers, velvet gowns, and murmured speculation. He extended his hand and Lena took it. The room quieted as they descended together. All eyes turned toward them, the murmurs sharpening into whispers. Nolan didn't flinch. He held her hand tighter, guiding her through the crowd like none of it mattered. An older man in a tailored navy suit intercepted them halfway. This is the woman, Nolan's voice was cool. This is Lena. She's not from our world. No, Nolan said. She's better. The man's expression soured. You're risking everything. I'm not risking anything that matters. Lena kept her gaze steady as they moved past him. More people approached, some curious, some skeptical, a few outright dismissive. One woman gave a polite smile, eyes scanning Lena's dress. Vintage? Borrowed, Lena said simply, from someone who believed in second chances. Nolan leaned in. That was perfect. I'm not here to impress anyone. I don't want you to. He led her to the center of the room as the orchestra shifted into a waltz. Without asking, he pulled her into a slow spin, his hand warm at her back. You're trembling, he whispered. I've never had this many people hoping I'll fail. Then we'll give them something to talk about. As the music swelled, Nolan bent his head low, his lips brushing her ear. Marry me, Lena froze. What? Tonight, after this, I already have everything arranged. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You're serious. I don't want to wait for the right time. I want you now as my wife. She stepped back slightly, searching his face. You're not doing this to prove a point? No. I'm doing this because every time I look at you, I see the life I didn't know I needed. Lena's voice shook. I didn't come here for this. I know, and that's why I trust it. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. Then you better have a damn good dress ready. He laughed, and the sound broke the tension in the room. People watched them, but they were far away now, just shadows on the edge of something bigger. That night, beneath a canopy of fairy lights in a rooftop garden Nolan had secretly restored, Lena walked barefoot down a stone path lined with white lilies. No guests, no press, just them and a justice of the peace who looked mildly starstruck. Nolan stood waiting, his tux jacket gone, his shirt collar open, a wedding band already in his palm. You sure? She asked, heart pounding as she reached him. I'm sure of one thing in this entire world, he said. You. She took his hand and they said the vows without paper, without prompt. Just words pulled from everything they'd lived through everything they hadn't said until now. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, Lena whispered, "I still can't believe you're real." He kissed her, slow and sure. "And I still can't believe you were brave enough to climb through a window." The justice of the peace cleared his throat. "By the power vested in me," Nolan didn't wait. He kissed her again before the sentence finished, lifting her clean off the ground as the garden burst with soft music and the lights overhead shimmered brighter. Later, they sat side by side on the edge of the rooftop, legs dangling, wind in their hair. "You gave up everything," Lena said softly. "For me, no," he said. "I finally found something worth everything." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "So this is what it feels like." Nolan turned to her. "What? To belong somewhere." He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her. "No. This is what it feels like to be loved completely." And as the city stretched out around them, glittering and endless, Lena knew she'd never have to sneak into anything again. She had already stolen his heart, and now it was hers. Forever. Rain battered the windows as Lena padded barefoot across the penthouse kitchen, her robe tied loosely around her waist, hair damp from the shower. A soft jazz melody played in the background, and the scent of fresh espresso lingered in the air. Nolan sat at the counter, sleeves pushed up, flipping through a stack of blueprints. He looked up the moment she entered, setting the papers aside. "You didn't sleep much," she said, pouring herself a cup. "I was thinking," he replied, watching her movements. "About what comes next?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "You mean after the spontaneous rooftop wedding and walking away from your own board?" He stood and crossed the room. "Exactly. Now that I've forfeited $500 million in projected earnings, I figure it's time to do something a little more meaningful." She leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee. "Like what?" He pulled a rolled document from the side table and spread it in front of her. "This." She narrowed her eyes. "A building, a community center, affordable housing, a local library with a tech lab. I bought the lot in Brooklyn years ago. It was supposed to be another luxury condo project, but now I want to build something that lasts, something that actually matters." Lena traced the edge of the drawing. "You're serious. I know I'm not the man who usually makes selfless decisions, but you changed how I see things. You made me want to build something real, not just for us, for other people who never got a shot." She set the mug down. "You think I can help? I don't think I know." "You have vision, Lena. You see people. I need that." "What would my role be?" "Partner, strategist, storyteller. You've lived it. You'd know exactly what these people need." She looked at the blueprint again and then up at him. "If we do this, we do it our way, no cutting corners. No pretending it's charity." "Agreed. And when people ask why a billionaire's building affordable housing, you'll tell them the truth. I fell in love with a woman who reminded me what home really is." Nolan folded the plans and set them aside. "There's one more thing." She gave him a wary look. "That tone usually leads to something reckless." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Not reckless, just overdue." Lena's breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a delicate gold band set with a single emerald-cut diamond surrounded by a halo of sapphires that shimmered like dusk. "I wanted to give you something that felt like you," he said. "Strong, singular, impossible to ignore." "I already married you," she whispered. "You did. But you didn't get a ring, or a promise outside of fairy lights and adrenaline." He took her hand. "So here's the promise. I will love you when things are messy, when buildings fall and plans fail, when you need space and when you need silence. I will love you without needing to be anyone but myself." She blinked back, the sudden sting in her eyes. "You're not making this easy." "I don't want easy, I want honest." She nodded once, then held out her hand. He slid the ring on slowly, reverently, and kissed her knuckles. Later that afternoon, Lena stood by the window, staring out at the skyline. Nolan came up behind her, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. "I've been thinking," she said. "That always leads somewhere dangerous." She smiled. "I want to stop writing copy for products I don't believe in. I want to use my voice for something better, maybe even write full-time." He wrapped his arms around her waist. Do it. Start tomorrow. I don't have a portfolio for the kind of work I want to do. Then let's build one. Together, he kissed her temple and they stood in silence, the city stretching endlessly before them. Over the next few months, the project in Brooklyn became more than a plan. It became a movement. Lena led storytelling workshops for local youth. Nolan handled zoning negotiations and convinced former investors to fund the initiative without profit margins. They hired local labor, sourced sustainable materials, and made every decision together. Nolan's name stayed in the headlines, but not for the reasons it used to. Articles shifted from scandal speculation to admiration. The billionaire who let go became a symbol of reinvention, but he didn't care about that. He cared about Lena's laughter echoing through drafty construction halls, or the way she lit up when a teenage girl read her first story aloud at the community library. One day, while walking through the nearly completed structure, Lena paused in front of a mural. It was a massive wall filled with colorful portraits of people from the neighborhood's smiling children, weathered faces, families holding hands. At the center was a sketch of her, holding an open book, a skyline blooming from the pages. She stared at it, speechless. Nolan appeared beside her. They insisted, she blinked. Why? Because they said you gave them a voice, she turned to him. I didn't do this alone. No, he said, you did it with love. That's why it worked. They moved into a brownstone just a few blocks from the center warm, filled with books and mismatched furniture, and windows that overlooked the park where kids now played on equipment Nolan had personally picked out. One evening, as they lay curled together beneath a quilt on the worn leather couch, the city lights flickering through the windows, Lena said softly, "You know what I've realized?" He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "What?" "That I never needed a perfect life. Just one where I felt seen, safe, loved." He kissed her slowly. "That's all I ever wanted to give you." They didn't need the penthouse anymore, or the gala invitations, or the endless tower of expectations. They had each other, a community, and a story still unfolding, and it was enough. It was everything.